Senator Lindsey Graham joins us from South Carolina. Good evening, Senator. And Senator, why did President Obama give this speech?
Well, this is a transition moment where combat operations end. General Odinero, the commander in Iraq, indicated that we could withdraw to 50,000 troops. I guess the president is trying to let the American people know that combat operations are over, and that's something that we've been hoping for a very long time. I think it's a missed opportunity by the president, quite frankly, to lay the cards out on the table and acknowledge not only did he and the president have differences, but President Bush made adjustments in 2007 that led to the success that we're having today. And I really wish the President Obama would acknowledge that. I think that would have been a classy thing to have done.
I think that you're making reference to the surge, which incidentally, even backing up from President Bush 43 supporting it, is that a former candidate for president and Senator John McCain was probably the first to raise it publicly that we should send more troops. And then Senator Barack Obama was opposed to it.
Yeah, well, if you look back, President Bush is going to get some blame for allowing Iraq to deteriorate. He's going to get credit for the surge, and Senator McCain was the big push of the surge politically. And going forward, President Obama will get his fair share of the credit if we're successful in Iraq, and he's going to get the lion's share of the blame if we fail. And the one thing the speech didn't emphasize enough to me is that combat operations may have ended, but Iraq is not over by any stretch of the imagination. They haven't formed a government yet, and I'm very worried about it, and I wish the Obama administration would pick up the pace to try to get the parties to reconcile with each other and to come up with a new government. Without that, the country's going to go back into chaos.
And I suppose the president is going to get a little heat tomorrow morning by the fact that he, of course, is supporting the surge in Afghanistan and sees the and has told the American people how effective that is and should be and will be, even though he opposed the surge when he was a candidate in Iraq, and he's going to get hit at least for that inconsistency, or maybe it's not inconsistency. I don't know.
Well, I hope he's learned that what President Bush and Senator McCain pushed in Iraq and he opposed worked, and I'm glad he's trying to do something similar in Afghanistan. I give him credit for adjusting and changing.
All right, let me ask you about the speech, though. There were some things that I, quite frankly, I wondered if it were simply political. At one point in speech, he's talking about the timeline in Afghanistan, and he says, and next July we will begin a transition to Afghan responsibility. And he goes on later to say, but make no mistake, this transition will begin because open-ended war serves neither our interests nor the Afghans' people. And of course, that's very popular with much of his base electing him. And I guess to throw into the mix, let me give you some sound, what General Conway has said about the whole idea of talking about timelines.
It's probably giving our enemy sustenance. We think that he may be saying to himself, in fact, we've intercepted communications that say, hey, we only have to hold out for so long.
So why put into this speech tonight, even if he intends to meet that timeline, why once again make that sort of public announcement?
I think you probably put your finger on it. There was a base element to this speech. He's reminding the Democratic base before the November election, I promised to end combat operations in Iraq, and I've delivered on this promise. That's a big deal to the left. The truth is that this whole drawdown was negotiated by President Bush, and he's trying to reinforce to those who oppose to this war that come July, we're going to withdraw troops. The only issue is how fast and how many. And General Conway put his finger on the problem. When you announce you're going to withdraw troops next July, the enemy doesn't hear an enduring commitment. They hear the fact that you're going to leave, and the only thing up for debate is how quick you leave. So he's really made a mess of it in Afghanistan by putting this condition of withdrawal. It may play well in the left of the Democratic Party, but it's not going to play well in Afghanistan, Pakistan, or Iran.
Well, I thought it was interesting. I mean, the way the speech started, as we've noticed, it started. I mean, of course, it was in the Oval Office, which has huge significance to us Americans. He talks about Iraq, and this was to announce the end of the combat phase. He then morphs into Afghanistan, which I guess is it's related. It's war, and we're at war there. But then he goes into, and the use of the timeline thing made me a little suspicious. It was political. Yeah. But then he goes into the economy on the war. Is that a necessary part of this discussion, or is that political?
Well, I think he's trying to let the American people know that by withdrawing troops from Iraq, we're going to have one less financial obligation. Give me credit for reducing a financial burden on the country. What he should have been talking about to me is that we've come a long way in Iraq. We're close to transforming the Mideast. We're vastly safer by Iraq becoming a democracy versus a dictatorship. And having a democracy in the heart of the Mideast in the Arab world is a transformative event. He recognized the sacrifice of the troops, but he didn't put it in context that the ones who died and were injured have made us all safer. And he should have transitioned to Afghanistan and say to the world at large, our enemies and our friends, I'm going to have the same commitment of winning in Afghanistan that President Bush showed to winning in Iraq. That's what I wanted him to say, not reinforce it. We're going to leave next July, not talk about the economic benefit of withdrawing from Iraq, but talking about the fact that we took terrorism on with the Iraqi people and we're on the verge of winning.
Except the big elephant in the room, and I don't mean elephant in reference to the Republican Party, but the big elephant in the room is that the reason, at least I understood why we went in there, was weapons of mass destruction. That wasn't mentioned tonight. Of course, that wasn't under this president's watch, the whole issue of weapons of mass destruction. Should that, I mean, is there a way that, you know, or I mean, how do we handle that with the American people? Because that was the original reason.
Well, here's what we need to tell the American people, that the intelligence from all over the world was that Saddam Hussein was trying to develop weapons of mass destruction. He had used weapons of mass destruction against his own people. He invaded his neighbors and he was up to no good. He was funding suicide bombers attacking Israel. And the president should have reminded the world and the American people that Saddam Hussein being replaced and the sacrifice that was necessary to replace him by the Iraqi people and the American people made us safer, and Al-Qaeda got their nose bloodied big time in Iraq with Muslims aligning with us to take on Al-Qaeda elements who went to undermine us in Iraq. And the big story of Iraq is that Al-Qaeda got beat by Muslims with our help.
Except, of course, though, there is the problem that Saddam Hussein used the weapons of mass destruction against his own people in 1985 or 1989. That's a problem.
Okay, can I just say something?
Yeah,
the
yeah. No, I mean, I'm just saying.
And
let me just say one other thing: as everybody got the intelligence wrong. Everybody, whether it's Tony Blair or Democrats or Republicans, the problem is, though, is that we pay everybody to get it right.
Well, here's the good news. Saddam Hussein is dead. The Iraqi people have a chance to live in freedom, to create a functioning democracy between Syria and Iran, and Al-Qaeda has been taken on by Muslims with our help. Iraq is a transformative event in the war on terror. The next fight is in Afghanistan. It's not about when we leave in Afghanistan, it's about what we leave behind. History will judge President Barack Obama not by the day we left Iraq, but by what we left behind. The same is true in Afghanistan. We're in a war that's going on for a very long time. Iraq and Afghanistan are two big battles. We're about to win in Iraq if we see this thing through, and we should have American troops in Iraq after 2011. It would be wise to have an American military presence in Iraq for a time to come to secure the gains we have struggled and sacrificed to achieve. I think it would be a mistake to leave Iraq totally without some American military presence for the foreseeable future.
Senator, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Coming up.